The Joyla Club, novel by Amazement, American author. The Joyla Club contains 16 interwoven stories about conflicts between Chinese immigrant mothers and their American-raised daughters. The book hinges on Jing Mei's trip to China to meet their half-sisters, twin Xuanhu and Xuanhua. The half-sisters remained behind in China because Jing Mei's mother, Xuan, was forced to leave them on the roadside during her desperate flight from Japan's invasions of Kulin during World War II. Jingmei was born to different fathers years later in America. Xuan intended to return to China for her other daughters, but failed to find them before her death. Jingmei has taken her mother's place playing mahjong in a weekly gathering her mother had organized in China and revived in San Francisco, the Joyla Club. The club's other members, Lindo, Ying, and Enmai, are three of other mother's oldest friends and fellow immigrants. They tell Jingmei that just before Xuan's death, she had finally succeeded in locating the address of her lost daughters. The three women repeatedly urge Jingmei to travel to China and tell her sisters about their mother's life. But Jingmei wonders whether she is capable of telling her mother's story, and the three other older women fear that Jingmei's doubts may be justified. They fear that their own daughters, like Jingmei, may not know or appreciate the stories of their mothers' lives. The novel is composed of 4 sections, each of which contains 4 separate narratives. In the first 4 stories of the book, the mothers, speaking in turn, recall with astonishing clarity their relationship with their own mothers, and they worry about their daughters. Recollections of them will never possess the same intensity. In the second section, these daughters, Waverly, Jingmei, Lina, and Rose, relate their recollections of their childhood relationship with their mothers. The great lucidity and force with which they tell their stories proves their mother's fear at least partially unfounded. In the third group of stories, the 4 daughters narrate their adult dilemmas, troubles in marriage and with their careers. Although they believe that their mother's antiquated ideas do not pertain to their own very American lifestyles, their search for solutions inevitably brings them back to their relationship with the older generation. In the final group of stories, the mothers struggle to offer solutions and support to their daughters in the process of learning more than themselves. Lindo recognizes through her daughter Waverly, that she has been irrecoverably changed by American culture. Ying realizes that Lina has unwittingly followed her passive example in her marriage to Harold Livotny. And Enmai realizes that Rose has not completely understood the lessons she intended to teach her about faith and hope. Although Jingmei fears that she cannot adequately portray her mother's life, Xuan's story permits the novel via Jingmei's voice. She speaks for Xuan in the first and fourth sections, the 2 mothers sections of the novel. Xuan's story is representative of the struggle to maintain the mother-daughter bond across cultural and generational gaps. By telling this story as her mother's daughter, Jingmei enacts and cements the very bond that is the subject of Xuan's story. When Jingmei finally travels to China and helps her half-sister to know a mother they cannot remember, She forges two other mother-daughter bonds as well. Her journey represents a reconciliation between Xuan's two lives, between two cultures, and between mother and daughter. This enables Jingmei to bring closure and resolution to her mother's story, but also to her own. In addition, the journey brings hope to other members of the Joala Club that they too can reconcile the oppositions in their lives between past and present, and between culture and between generations. There is important quotes of the novel. What will I say? What can I tell them about my mother? I don't know anything. The aunties are looking at me as if I had become crazy right before their eyes. And then it occurs to me. They're frightened. They're frightened. In me, they see their own daughters, just as ignorant. They see daughters who grow impatient when their mothers talk in Chinese. Who will bear grandchildren born without any connecting hope passed from generation to generation? This quote from novel, which is found at the end of the book's first story, establishes some of the central theme of the novel. The passage establishes Jingmei Wu as a representative of the book's younger generation, the American-born daughters who feel largely out of touch with their Chinese identities and with their Chinese mothers. As Jingmei acknowledges this, she also shows a deep sympathy with the older generation. She understands their fears about their daughters, about their distress at the idea that their hopes and dreams may not survive them in their modern American women for whom so many of the old values no longer have meaning. However, even while Jingmei perceived the mother-daughter gap from both sides, this double perception ultimately served not to accentuate the gap, but to bridge it. Throughout the novel, Jingmei provides a connecting voice between the generations. She tells both the story of an American-born daughter longing for the independence and the story of her mother, who fought hard to give her daughters the freedoms that she never had. Thus, by the last chapter of the book, Jingmei will come to represent a figure of hope for both generations, that they might understand each other better than they had thought, that they might share in a dialogue of love that often transcends linguistic and cultural barriers. There is another quote I can mention. I looked in the mirror. I was strong. I was pure. I had genuine thoughts inside that no one could see, that no one could ever take away from me. I was like the wind, and then I dabbed that large embroidered red scarf over my face and covered these thoughts up. But underneath the scarf, I still knew who I was. I made a promise to myself. I would always remember my parents' wishes, but I would never forget myself. In this quotation, which is from Lindo Jong's narrative, The Red Candle, Lindo introduces what will become an important link between herself and her daughter Waverly. Here she narrates how she first come to recognize her inner invisible strength, a strength that her daughter will inherit and come to use her chess matches. This strength gives Lindo the power to endure the hardship that a restrictive society forces upon her. She stares into the mirror as she prepares for her arranged marriage to a man she does not love, knowing that to flee the marriage would be to go back in her parents' promise to her husband's family. Yet she also makes a promise to herself, which she determines to honor to equal devotion. Lindo's lesson in balancing duty to one's parent and duty to oneself also linked her to her own daughter and to all of the daughters in the book who must learn to revive their heritage and their elders without becoming passive, without giving up their own desire and aspirations. While the struggle of this balance often alienates mothers and daughters, it also brings them closer together. For all of them have faced these challenges at some point in their lives, whether or not the mother's choice to recollect it. The central event in this passage, Lindo's recognition of her value and her subsequent covering of it with her scarf, symbolizes another lesson in balance. She learns to listen to her own heart and maintain her strength even as she hides this away beneath the scarf. She knows that sometimes the strongest force is a hidden one, although this gesture of concealment can also easily become a gesture of passivity. Lindo escapes the passivity that characterizes so many of the other female characters in the Jala Club, because she knows when to expose what she hides. Another quotes, "A mother is best. A mother knows what is inside you." She said, "A psychiatrist will only make you huluhudu, make you see humongmong back home." I thought about what she said. These were words I had never thought about in the English terms. I suppose the closest in meaning would be confused and dark folk. But really, the words means much more than that. Maybe they can't be easily translated because they refer to the sensation that only Chinese people have. This quotation is from Rose Jordan's story, Without Wood. Rose and her mother and May sit in the church and speak about Rose's visit to the psychiatrist, challenging her mother's adherence to what she feels in an odd Western convention. And May asks Rose why she feels she must tell a psychiatrist, a complete stranger, about her marital woes, when she refuses to confide in her mother about him. There is a linguistic barriers between Chinese and American cultures are especially prominent in this section of the novel. American translation. The passage highlights linguistic discrepancy twice. In the first instant, and May appears unable to pronounce psychiatrist. Yet her mispronunciation may be delivered by calling the doctor a psychiatrist. She may be devotedly disparaging him as someone who plays tricks on the psyche, a quack not be trusted. The second illustration of the language barriers arises of Rose's own meditation on the Chinese word her mother has used. She struggles to explain them and then wonder whether they can be translated into English at all. While one might find subtitles for them in English, she doubts whether the true feeling they connote can be felt by a non-Chinese person. The question then becomes whether these problems of translation inevitably alienate immigrant mothers from their American-born daughters, leading to the situation then and my complaints of. A situation in which mother and daughter are unable to confide in each other or discuss their inner experiences with one another, in which they must go to strangers for help and support. Analysis of the Jola Club by Hamilton. Hamilton is the author of 7 books, including the New York Times bestseller The Jola Club, The Kitchen God's Wife, and The Opposite of Fate, which was also a New York Times notable book. With millions of copies in print, Ten's books continue to draw new readers and are often adopted in school and municipal reading programs across the United States. Ten was also a co-producer and co-screenwriter of the film version The Jola Club, and her essays and stories have appeared in numerous magazines and anthologies. She is a literary editor for West, the weekly magazine produced by the Los Angeles Times. Her work has been translated into more than 30 languages. She lives with her husband in New York and San Francisco. The Joy Luck Club. Each mother-daughter pair struggles with cultural and generational differences. The daughters tend to see their mothers as old-fashioned, overbearing, out of touch, and ever-threatening. In turn, the mothers are like mother-daughter relationship, a lack of understanding of culture, Chinese culture. They have the lack of understanding between them, and lack of understanding of Chinese culture, attitude toward man, and satisfaction in unglamorous jobs. It is moments of conflict with one another and with others that each mother and daughter realizes the validity of the other's perspective. To some extent, they are able to step into one another's skins. The climax of the novel comes with Zheng Mei travels to China for the first time to meet her long-lost sister. It was Xuan specific wish to be reunited with her long-lost daughters. But the essence of this wish lies in all the mothers, to be truly connected in spirit to their daughter. Therefore, at the end of the novel, Zheng Mei has fulfilled not only her own mother's legacy, but also those of all the members of the Joy Luck Club. Each mother-daughter has need their interconnection. How reveal the hope and love can transform sadness, anger, despair, and fears from the past. The Joy Luck Club is about the power of storytelling between generations. To know your family's past is to know yourself, and with that knowledge, you are free to shape your own destiny. Through storytelling, the fragile bonds between mother and daughter are pulled and tightened as each feels what the other means by hope.